and that there are absolutely things we can do, then there are fantastic people that specialize in that, because sleep training can be a really fascinating area of study. And so I absolutely implore people to. So when that is the case, some of the things that we do, for example, for shift workers, because I think it's important to step back and know that. So what can we do about it? Well, so one of the clues could be, what would be some of the perils of not kind of supporting this area? Well, one,
Is the best version of yourself showing up when you're sleep deprived? Have we actually forgotten how to sleep? Is it a skill we need to relearn? Sleep isn't just a luxury, it's a skill. And Mollie Eastman has made it her life's purpose to help all of us master it. In this conversation, we dive into why so many of us are struggling to get quality rest, how modern life disrupts our natural rhythms, and what you can do starting tonight to reclaim your nights and supercharge your days. Whether you're a chronic insomniac or just looking to feel more energized, this week's episode of the Chris Senise Podcast might just change the way you sleep forever. Take a listen. Welcome, Mollie.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Definitely. I talked about sleep being an underrated sort of tendency that we would have, but you have made it your life's mission to put this out there so that people can kind of fix this, get better at it, and reach peak performance, which is ultimately what we're hoping to do with our podcast to maximize our potential. So give us a little bit about what led you to this.
Yeah, because the context really shapes the whole mission for me. And partly because I just did not expect that I would be in this line of work whatsoever. And it came from really solving my own problem with my sleep. And what that looked like was, as a serial entrepreneur in Manhattan, burning the candle at both ends. I had a relationship with my sleep that was one of just a lot of labels and narratives. I would say things like, I'm a short sleeper, I'm a night owl, it's in my genes, I'll sleep when I'm dead, all these sort of isms with my sleep. And it wasn't, so it just sort of surviving my sleep for a long time, just thought of it as something that maybe I wasn't the best at it, but that's just how things are. And it wasn't until I went through this period of insomnia while traveling internationally with my husband. We've been together 14 years. In the beginning of our relationship, we decided to take our businesses on the road, put everything in storage, and just sort of do a digital nomad style lifestyle, and not quite understanding just the amount of stress that uncertainty was going to bring about. And the experience for me was one of this. Suddenly I had this experience where I go to bed at night and I no longer guarantee that I'll sleep that night, or, very little sleep would come to me. And that was an incredibly kind of scary period of time, stressful period of time, because then it started, after one night turns to the next night, you start to wonder, like, am I stuck like this? Like, what happened? Am I broken? And I went to the doctors while traveling, eventually went to this little clinic in Croatia, of all places, and leave with sleeping pills in that moment. And, when looking at the prescription, just this fear of both knowing, like, I'm desperate, so I'm going to take these things, but I'm also very fearful of, what does this mean for me? What is the plan here? How long is this charade gonna, last? And what's available for me to make a difference with this area of life? And why is this a problem for me right now? So that really led me down this path, this kind of rabbit hole, to understand, how do I get my sleep back? And I wasn't even interested in it, like, optimizing my sleep at that point. It was just purely like, get me to sleep was the goal. And eventually, while we were traveling, I went to, different doctors, left with different sleeping pills, time after time. Eventually traveled back to the United States because of my sleep, because it was just becoming such a problem. I did discover I did have other health issues at play. I had a parasite. I had some other autoimmune things flaring up. I had some other stuff going on that was making it more challenging as well. But But what ultimately kind of transformed the game for me was really a whole overhaul in how I was managing my health and my life. And part of what I discovered was this whole world of circadian rhythm entrainment, which we can talk more about, which is largely an area of study that is free for the most part, behavioral in nature, and available to each and every one of us, and something that kind of used to just work when we lived outdoors in nature more routinely. But because many of us have now have the experience of having gone indoors, we've divorced ourselves from those rhythms of nature. And now we're suffering the consequences. So today, on the other side of this, I started the company Sleep is a Skill. And I truly believe that our modern society, sleep has become a skill set. And in alignment with that, we do a lot of kind of out of the box things to look at sleep. So one of the things we do is we have one of the larger databases of Oura Ring users from a sleep optimization perspective. So that allows us to look at a lot of, sleep data to see what does really move the needle for people. And then we also have an interesting niche in high stakes poker. So we work with a lot of high stakes poker players. And I share that because they are in environments that are designed on purpose to confuse the circadian rhythm. Casinos that have, no windows, lots of blue light, lots of stimuli, no clocks. Like the whole intention is to confuse the body and have you there as long as possible and kind of in this activated state. Now, if we're able to make a difference with people in those environments, I promise to anyone listening that there's always things that we can do to support your sleep, no matter where you might be at on the journey of your sleep, whether you're really struggling or, like I know my story is a little more dramatic, but even if you're not like, just at your wit's end, maybe you just you have a curiosity of like, maybe I could be doing this thing that I do a third of my life, on average 20, 6 years or so, or spent asleep. Maybe there's something I could do to kind of up level it. Wherever you fall in that spectrum, there are things that we can do.
That's interesting because when I think about what even led us to you, one of the things that we were exploring as a possible episode were chronotypes. And we were like, is this thing
Yes.
legit? Is this real?
Yeah.
And going down our own rabbit hole of what would be the perfect episode to address this, we came across you. And it made me think about a lot of things when I researched you, by the way, because
Amazing.
I'm in the finance world in the day. And then I'm a musician at night. So a lot of that conflicts and affects my sleep.
Yeah.
To a point where it would create such anxiety for me because I would have a hard time falling asleep. And I think part of that was going to sleep so late and then having to wake up early. And it would create this anxiety at night where when I couldn't fall asleep, I was counting down the hours until I had to wake up. So I would be like, I haven't fallen asleep. I have 4 hours to sleep. I still haven't fallen asleep. I have 3 hours to sleep. And going down that level of anxiety, knowing I needed to address it and knowing this was literally my term. I get a little nutty when I don't sleep right.
You're not alone, by the way.
Right. Yeah. And so looking into that and hearing you talk about, you kind of have to treat yourself like a baby, just get down to the basics, was very interesting. And I'm like, we need to talk to her because if she's trying to reach the masses with her message, let's help in that as much as we can, because I do personally think this is as important as water consumption, which I think is another underrated form of treatment, right?
Couldn't agree more.
And so with that, it makes me think about other people that may be struggling with sleep, right? Like parents to a new baby, all of the things outside of your control, potentially. How can you help those people, right? What would that message be to them who they're sleep deprived, right? For obvious reasons. What do you tell people like that?
Yeah, so good. Well, one, I acknowledge you and appreciate you sharing your own story with your sleep, because I think it's just so relatable. And who hasn't had the experience of at some point throughout the night, that old countdown of, oh no, now it's only 4 hours. No, it's only 3 hours. What am I going to do?
Mhm.
And that sleep anxiety is a real thing. And people can find themselves, of course, 1 or 2 nights here and there, a problem, a struggle, but you can get through it. But when people find themselves routinely,
Mhm.
multiple times a week or what have you, experiencing that can start to just really wear on them.
Mhm.
So you sharing that really is so important, and that there are absolutely things we can do.
Mhm.
Now, as you pointed to some of these situations where people have circumstances at play that can just, we know, impact our sleep. Well, I will say, one, there are absolutely fantastic sleep experts that absolutely specialize in sleep training. I am not one of those people, but if people are, do have new kids, can you tell I don't have kids? New kids like a car. So if you have a new baby or what have you, then there are fantastic people that specialize in that, because sleep
Mhm.
training can
Mhm.
be a really fascinating area of study. And so I absolutely implore people to get educated from the same perspective of this idea of sleep being a skill. And if some people might be at sleep, 401, and some people might be at sleep 101. And so
Mhm.
figuring out where is our aptitude for the things that can make that difference with our sleep. And the more we know, the better we can do. And a really important example of that, I think, is often shift workers, or people that, and you can actually fall into that, and to a certain extent, for what you were sharing, when you have some of these kind of work obligations or things that are important to you that are likely to impact your normal scheduling of your
Mhm.
sleep wake cycle.
Yeah.
So anytime we have some of those things, and of course that can be the parents, and there's going to be all kinds of a myriad of reasons that people might find that their normal wake time and bedtime is now having some extra obstacles. So when that is the case, some of the things that we do, for example, for shift workers, one, we always try to make a lifestyle out of this as much as humanly possible. So what I mean by that is that we're trying to figure out, where are the things that we can start to bring consistency to your sleep, because sleep loves consistency. So if
Mhm.
there's any things that we can move around, so for example, we have a lot of people that come our way and maybe they have like a later shift, or performance or whatever, that is like the beginning of the week, and then the weekends they try to go back to like their normal scheduling, and that's where things can get thrown off. Or they say, like,
Mhm.
listen, I want to be able to be like a normal person and go to the bank at this time, or go to do this thing. And it makes a lot of sense. But also from a sleep perspective, what we're trying to do is see, how can we have that around 7 days a week, plus or minus ideally 30 minutes or so, that you're still going to bed at around the same time and waking up at around the same time, and making kind of bold requests of our work environment, or otherwise, if we have to see if there's the workability to kind of shift around certain shift schedules, or
Mhm.
ways to make sure that we're having sufficient sleep opportunity. Because if we're not having that sufficient sleep opportunity, granted, if it's a one or two, just a one off every quarter or something, yeah, we get it, we can work around that. But if this is happening routinely multiple times a week, we really need to see, what can we do to move the needle here, so that people do have that sufficient amount of time to both wind down, and get ample, or sufficient sleep for them, and
Mhm.
then wake up feeling rested. So a lot of this can be about kind of life design, and designing things to be workable, and seeing, is this problematic? Is this something that we can almost relate to, like, we're going to be taking a trip or something, and so we're planning on that jet lag, and we're going to power through it, and we have certain things that we can do to make a difference, but we know it's just going to be a little funky for that day or two, but we'll handle it? Or is this something that we actually do need to make some more lasting changes with? So we're kind of diving in from a psychological aspect of things, and not cutting corners on, to your point, around sleep, of being just as important as the water you're taking in or what have you, because you're just not going to be able to sustain if it's going to be consistently cut into, time and time again.
Yeah, that's great. One of the things, that I've heard you say before, and we can pivot into this, is that you should have multiple sleep studies done
Yes.
in your lifetime. And
Yeah.
and that's a great point because things do change, circumstances change, your lifestyle changes.
Yeah.
So can we talk a little bit about what our viewers can gain by having multiple sleep studies done in their lifetime, right? What does that tell us, and then how would we adapt once we have that information?
I'm so glad you mentioned that. I literally, I am like a pull string doll where it says like a number of things like over and over again. And I just said this exact same thing on a call right before this call.
Mhm.
So I will underscore because it's so important. Because I think it's important to step back and know that number one, there's over 100 sleep wake disorders. So for people that are saying, well, is it really like that big of a deal? I don't hear my doctor didn't mention it. So, like, do I really need to do that? Unfortunately, just knowing that the average doctor right now, even out of Harvard Med, gets about 2 hours of training in sleep. So, it's not necessarily that they're being, malicious or something by not mentioning it. They just don't have the training to know
Right.
to be able to spot some of these things that are clear red flags that so many people, we know that the numbers are astounding of the number of people that are running around undiagnosed for things like notably sleep apnea, but other
Mhm.
things, insomnia, so difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep, restless leg syndrome, periodic limb movement disorder, narcolepsy, bruxism, so just teeth grinding. There are a number, and just snoring, like so many sleep disorders that are out there, and that's just naming a few. So, what can we do about it? Well, we can test at home now so easily for so affordably. So we're talking some tests are even around $100 and really simple, like a ring that you just wear
Mhm.
to go to bed. No big deal. And then you're able to at least get information about respiratory based disorders, and
Mhm.
then sometimes if we take a look and we see some abnormal things, then it could be signs that, oh, maybe we want to test you. There are more advanced at home tests that are a little bit more expensive and in depth that go on different limbs and on the brain and other things. So those are all at home. So that's exciting. Just a little bit more expensive. That would be something that we'd maybe be a step two. And then if we say, oh, actually, there's some other things at play, maybe we'll bring you in lab. And that would, of course, be the more kind of gold standard to really go in, see what else is going on. But for most people, I will say, we can glean a lot of information just from those at home tests. So, getting those at home tests can be life changing. Like, for instance, I had my mom do this a few years ago. And for a long time, she was like, no, I don't want to do that, blah, blah. And I finally got her to do that. And of course, she had moderate sleep apnea, but the titles they're confusing because if some people say, oh, I have mild sleep apnea, when you hear mild, it sounds mild, but that is dramatic because we're talking about apnea is a cessation of breathing, the inability to breathe properly throughout the course of your sleep. And so for my mom, she was, what the heck was she at? Ooh, I want to say maybe like 27 times or something an hour where she wasn't properly breathing throughout the course of the
Mhm.
night. And that, and then there's different categories. But what's important to get is that even just like a couple times of not being able to breathe throughout 1 hour while you're sleeping, you can imagine like an experience of being choked throughout the like night
Yeah,
many times through an.
suffocating. Mhm.
Yeah, that's a
Mhm.
big deal. And so unfortunately, I think we got to really get the message out that um while we don't want to celebrate if you get a diagnosis of a sleep disorder, at least though, if you have been dragging and so tired and what have you, I want people to know that there's so much we can do once we have that
Mhm.
realization. And then on top of that, that it doesn't have to look like how a lot of people think it looks. So many people think, oh, it's just the Darth Vader mask. It's like this whole thing. I don't want to even go there. No way, not for me.
Mhm.
But the mask is an option, which is can make a big difference. My mom actually wears the mask now. Let's keep using her example. And
Mhm.
she literally just texted me this morning. She's like, I still can't get over how much better my sleep is without my CPAP. Like
Mhm.
she didn't wear it one of the nights, and then her sleep was just atrocious. So you really then feel the difference. But there's the mask, but then there's also all these other things. There are laser treatments. There are things for your nose. There are things for the tongue. There's oral
Mhm.
appliances that can move the jaw forward to open up the airway. There are implants that you can do that can almost act as like pacemakers. There's exercises you can do. There's positional treatments. There are a ton of things that can transform your experience of a life, add years to your life, because we know that this can impact your longevity, your cardiovascular health, your mental health. I mean, so for all my like more entrepreneurial listeners or people that it's really important to them to be productive in the world, to take
Right.
on, their lives with gusto. Good luck if you've been being choked all night, essentially,
Mhm.
the equivalent. And then being able to feel refreshed and able to think clearly and have that functioning high level cognition, it's
Mhm.
just not going to be there. So that is just one of those sleep disorders.
Mhm.
And multiple times throughout our lives, the reason I say that is that one, for lots of changes can happen in our lives as we gain weight, as our hormones shift, as our musculature changes, but also for women, we find especially changes that around post 40 or so, then we start
Mhm.
having some marked shifts in our hormones that can bring about sleep disorders where there were no sleep disorders before.
Right.
So if they were tested back in their 20s, 30s, they might be dealing with a whole different them, and different sleep disorders might evolve or change, and then change the kind of treatment that we're bringing about.
Definitely. I just think sleep is tied to so many things. And
Yes.
that's why I've been very excited about this specific podcast because
Yay.
I think that um, we think of it as a basic necessity, but a
Yeah.
lot of times we can be our own worst enemies in this.
Yeah.
And I've heard you talk about light bulbs, blue light, and what are the things, the basics that we're doing to ourselves on a daily basis that is keeping us from optimizing our sleep? What are we doing to ourselves,
Yeah.
Molly? Tell us,
Yeah.
what are
What
we
are we
doing to
doing?
ourselves?
Yeah.
Because
And
in today's world, especially digital,
yeah.
how are we affecting ourselves from having the best sleep ever every single day?
Yeah, and there can be a kind of bad news moment of like, oh, we're like, what are we doing to ourselves? But then it can be a good news moment because then it can be like,
Mhm.
oh my God, we're doing this to ourselves. Like,
Mhm.
yay, because now suddenly our power is back in our hands.
Right.
So I
We can
love.
fix it. We can
Yes,
fix it.
we can
Right.
fix it. Exactly. And often like for no money, or
Mhm.
minimal investment or what have you. So
Mhm.
I love that you started there. So what I would say is number one, since 2001 or in 2001, the EPA did a
Mhm.
study and they found that the average person was spending around 90% of their days indoors.
Mhm.
And this is problematic, notably because number one, that was back in 2001, before a pandemic, global pandemic, before work
Mhm.
from home revolutions,
Right.
before Netflix, before smartphones, all these things. So it's likely we're probably even higher on the amount of time that we're spending indoors in these kind of like Tupperware like environments. And
Mhm.
so meaning that we're not necessarily getting proper airflow, meaning that we're not getting proper light exposure, meaning that our temperature is kind of static at the same 70 whatever degrees all day, every day. And so for the average person, that can sound like, oh, is that really that big of a deal? Yes, it is, because this is taking us away from these cues that we used to get from nature when we lived outside more routinely. So those things used to just sort of happen.
Mhm.
And now that we've gone indoors, now we are no longer having that strong signaling. And a couple of those signals that are most noteworthy, and there's a bunch of them,
Mhm.
but if you only get like a couple things out of this episode, then I hope it are some of these. So, one is that we want to anchor the start of our day with bright light exposure from the sun. I know you're over in Miami, so you got lots of opportunity to get lots of sun. Yay. And so getting ourselves outside, exactly, woo, woo. Getting ourselves outside, and this is a big deal. I mean, I I literally moved. I grew up in Maine, which had some really rough winters, beautiful, but just rough winters. Lived in Manhattan forever, and also experienced those hard and challenging periods when the sun would be set at like 4 p.m. or whatever it would be, and you'd be freezing, you'd be indoors all the time. So I purposely moved to Austin to be able to have more of an easily accessible outdoor lifestyle. Now, it's not to say that if you are in a northern location, if you can't, that there's still not the opportunity to live more routinely outside. It's just you're going to have to embrace the cold a lot more than I was kind of interested in doing personally. But either way, we have to actually be willing to get a little uncomfortable to sleep really well. And so, what I mean by that is we want to be embracing and kind of going outside in the elements, even when it's cloudy, even when it's not the nicest out, whatever. That we are still getting ourselves outside to get that full spectrum light, because a lot of things are kind of communicated to the body, and most notably the suprachiasmatic nucleus, also known as the SEN, that is right behind the eyes. And so that proximity to the eyes is partly why we know and have measurably know that light is one of the biggest zeitgebers or time givers to the body to tell it what time it is and what to be doing when. And it's acting like a master kind of conductor to all of these other clocks that are in every cell and organ in our body, and also looking to stay on time. So when the body is out of sync with time, things start to really go awry, because then we don't have any count-onableness and predictability for the body to know, well, when do I work on digestion and healing the gut lining? When do I work on healing all the muscles that you just worked out at that gym, wherever? When do we go to work on brain health and cleansing the brain? So all of these things need a schedule. And if we are all over the place, which is, to use myself as an example, was how I was living. I'd go to bed super late. I would eat super late. I would wake up late. I wouldn't have any sort of cues of the right lighting or temperature or exercise or any of these things. And the body was just kind of acting in chaos. And this chaos is not what circadian health and strong circadian rhythm thrives in. So to bring it back, we want to be waking up at about the same time, 7 days a week. Then right shortly after waking, we want to be getting bright light exposure physically outside. And we want to have that time outside where we're not wearing sunglasses or hats or anything, so that we get that bright light into our eyes and on our skin. And then we want to be dosing that throughout the course of the day. We did have an expert, Dr. Sachin Panda, on our podcast that spoke to some research where out of his lab, finding the need to have about an hour of time outside in the sun to be able to make sufficient melatonin at night, which can be confusing because it's like, well, why do you need the presence of sun to make the hormone of darkness, which is what melatonin has often been known as?
Right.
But it kind of goes and relates back to part of our understanding of one, that only in recent years have we gotten the message that our mitochondria is partly responsible for producing melatonin, and that's also happening in the brain. So there's different areas of melatonin production, but so there's this brain-based melatonin and mitochondrial melatonin, but it needs the presence of sunlight to make that. So if you can gamify this of your consistent wake up time, now you're dosing your sunlight, but you're also throughout the course of the day aiming to get that 1 hour of time outside under that sun. That is going to be new for most people because most people just haven't been getting that. Or they say, oh, no, I get sun. I'm in a sunny office or whatever. But then they're behind windows, like these windows. Right. So I have, as I'm talking to you, I have them slid back. So I'm still able to get actual unadulterated sun, because when you're getting the sun from behind these windows, then it's impacting the full spectrum light. And then you're not getting some of the crucial information from that light that's telling a number of things around your hormones, and certainly for I mentioned women and some of the changes that we might be experiencing with our hormones at different seasons of our lives. These are
Mhm.
really crucial for us, but all humans need to get these signals. So starting with that bright light by day, and then maximizing our darkness by night. If you begin there, but then also use that as your blueprint for the types of behaviors you're engaging in. So when the sun is out, that's when you're eating, that's where you're exercising, that's where you're maybe taking on kind of more stressful or activating kind of conversations.
Mhm.
Whereas when the darkness has fallen, and if it's happening outside, we want to bring that inside. So that's where you're doing really dim lighting, maybe kind of red hues, orange hues, fire-like hues, Himalayan salt lamps, Edison bulbs, incandescent lamps. And so you're doing all those things inside. And that's also where you're having a digestive break. So you're not really eating when the sun is out for the most part. You're not really crazily exercising and moving your body. You're also not having those stressful conversations that are activating you, getting you all amped up. You're not having types of drugs that can, mess with things and kind of bring your physiology in an up state, because we want to down regulate in the evenings. So you really want to audit what's happening in your days, what's happening in your nights, and are
Right.
they aligned with kind of this up state and down state? And that's really what we want to use as kind of a central mantra for our sleep wake.
And I like that. I think it's we all need that. I think when things are going wrong, right? Where we're not feeling 100% and our
Yeah.
wellness isn't where we would want it to be, I think the first thing we do is, I need to go to the doctor for this,
Yeah.
versus auditing our lifestyle and saying,
Yeah.
I need to make some changes before I take that route. And I'm not suggesting in the least that if you're not feeling well, you shouldn't go to the doctor. I just think, explore what's already available to you. One of the things you've talked about that I've heard you talk about is also temperature,
Yeah.
right? Having the right temperature in your surroundings as you're getting ready for bed or a few hours before you're getting ready for bed. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. So this temperature piece, because when we lived outside, we would have been naturally just having some of that dynamic component. So as we spoke about the light, when you'd be living outside, then it would become the sun would set and it would get really dark. Well, what also happens when the sun sets? If anyone's spent any time at the beach, like you're an expert in this over in Miami, right? So you have this whole hot day and the sun is like you're walking on the sand and the sand's hot and you're like, oh my gosh, and then the sun sets, and then suddenly it's like, I need a sweater. Like, what happened? Now it's cold. The sand's cold. It's a whole different thing. Those two signals are so clear to the body for, thousands to millions of years of
Mhm.
evolution, that
Mhm.
those two changes equaled, oh, we're going to be sleeping soon. And so that, oh, we're going to be sleeping soon piece is really important. So if we're not getting those signals when we're just spending all day, every day indoors now, we want to try to help the body, guide it, give it the
Right.
clues. So, one of the
Mhm.
clues could be then turning your thermostat down progressively in the evening to kind of mimic again what's going on outside. So, we're
Mhm.
already doing that with the lighting. So, when we're
Right.
doing that with the lighting, then we're bringing in the temperature piece. I anticipate that in the future, this will kind of just happen when we're in a lot of smart homes, that will just automatically, the temperature will kind of do this in a circadian aligned fashion. We're already seeing different environments like hospitals, certain kind of like more forward thinking hospitals or corporate environments might have more of the circadian aligned lighting that they're already doing, so you don't have to think about it, it just kind of happens. But I foresee that in more residential homes that we'll see these things happen too, but until that happens, then you can just manually do that. And then certainly when you actually go to sleep, having it markedly drop too in your sleep environment. So there's not a ton of things that I really recommend investing in to really move the needle with your sleep. Most of these things are going to just be the hard one,
Mhm.
components of the consistency and the boring stuff.
Mhm.
But one thing is cooling mattress toppers. No, we see make a measurable difference for people with their sleep. So any of those or actual cooling mattresses themselves, and that can feel like, well, ugh, I mean, we're talking about going back in history. Like, do we really need such newfangled things? But I make the argument that while it is kind of newfangled, it it's actually trying to harken back to our hunter-gatherer days when we would live outside on the ground. And when we're on the ground, that would be one of the coolest parts of the environment. And
Mhm.
so we're actually kind of mimicking what our old environment would have been like. And so in that, spirit, if you can get your temperature, part of the suggestion from the Sleep Foundation is between 60 to 67 degrees while you're sleeping,
Wow.
which is markedly colder, cooler than a lot of people are doing. And if you can, on top of that, have the cooling piece on the actual mattress itself, because even if your environment's really cool, most of us have these big duvets and our pajamas and all these things. So we're kind of cooking inside these foreign environments, and often maybe like a foam type mattress or what have you, and it's trapping that temperature inside, and so you're now just even hotter than we would have been in our natural kind of environment. So taking the steps to do that, and then also taking the steps to by day, helping to support a real high amplitude shift of your body
Mhm.
temperature. We want to see that you're at a higher body temperature by day. So if you have the ability in your space to turn up your temperature to a certain component that can mimic what would happen in nature when it be warmer out,
Right.
and then but making sure that whatever's going on, that it's warmer by day and markedly cooler by night, because that will give the body the message that, oh, it's time to sleep now.
Right. So going outdoors is huge for me because I
Yeah.
think, being in canned air is, between air quality and apparently light. I love how you're talking about having the windows open and your hair is just kind of
Yeah.
flowing in the wind. It's so
Yes.
great. But
Yes.
yeah, I think going outdoors is so huge for our wellness and clearly our sleep, but
Yeah.
I think we really probably don't get outdoors as much as we should. And
Yep.
this whole thing about just create. I'm a person of a creature of habit, routines, habits, good ones,
Yeah.
right? That we want to live our best lives, and I think this is great information. But going outdoors apparently has a lot more benefits, including with our sleep, and
Yeah.
so we should develop these sort of routines at night just to get really good sleep. And I think this information is great. I love the research you're doing. It needs to get out there. It seems so simple,
Yeah.
yet we're
Exactly.
not doing the simple things. Can you just to close it out, tell me a little bit about some of the health risks, right, that
With not
come
sleeping.
out of not sleeping
Mhm.
well and how important these 6 years of sleep are to
Yeah.
us as people. You said it was 6 years, correct?
Oh,
Oh,
26 years? Yes, 26. So on average,
26
yeah,
years
20. So
of
in
sleeping.
we're sleeping a third of our lives, on average 26 years spent
Right.
asleep. And yet often not really looked at that much with any, real thought for many of us.
Uh-huh.
And so yeah, what would be some of the perils of not
Right.
kind of supporting this area? Well, one, and there's lots of different ways that we might not be supporting. So one component is sleep duration. So we know that sleeping less than 6 hours a night consistently. There's a big meta analysis that found that people that sleep less than 6 hours consistently seem to have a number of cardiovascular issues, stroke, cognitive decline, and death from any cause markedly go up, and also known as all cause mortality. So, when we can link some of those clear and measurable impacts on your sleep just from sleep duration being impacted, and as a
Mhm.
reminder,
Mhm.
sort of the recommended amount of sleep for healthy adults is between 7 to 9 hours. So, if you're just getting kind of under that number routinely, that's not to say there are certainly people that can fall somewhere in the 6 hour range. Maybe they sleep 6 hours and 45 minutes or something, or they might be a little bit on the other side of the bell curve, sleeping more than 9 hours, and that's part of
Mhm.
their needed amount of sleep. So we do need to find the sleep need for the individual, but the falls and thin slices into about that 7 to 9 hours. But when we start quickly going beyond that kind of U-shaped curve, there
Right.
starts to be problems that we see for people with their health. And certainly about that 6 hour mark, when you start going less than that, that's where we start seeing problems from sleep duration. Also, sleep fragmentation. So, if you're waking up a lot throughout the course of the night, which is one of the most common reasons that people come our way, they're so frustrated with wake ups, they can't fall back asleep, or
Mhm.
just really annoying. They have to keep waking up to go pee or whatever. So, sleep fragmentation, one is a signature of kind of older sleep. So, we can
Mhm.
look at things like sleep age is something that will now in the future be able to start giving to people the same way you can test for your chronological versus biological age. We'll be able to test for sleep age using AI. And one of those features is that if you are fragmented throughout your sleep, then that's kind of characteristic of an older pattern of sleep. So, when you are having some of that impacted sleep architecture, that can impact
Mhm.
things like deep sleep for one, and of course REM. But deep sleep has gotten a lot of press because if you're not getting that, we discovered in about 2012 something known as glymphatic drainage with a
Heard about
G. Yeah,
that.
and so that's got a lot of attention because it appears that there could be correlations between not getting sufficient deep sleep routinely and going through that glymphatic drainage process,
Mhm.
and correlations with neurological disorders. So, like Parkinson's, Alzheimer's,
Mhm.
dementia. And so, this is a big deal because previously the thinking was, oh, there's not much we can do about this, but this would actually be something you could do decades in advance to support yourself if we have fears around that. But even just on the short term, that's a long term, but in the short term, so your cognition, kind of brain fog, your ability to function clearly the next day, all of those things impacted with not getting sufficient deep sleep. Deep sleep also where we get a predominant amount of our growth hormone. So for growth and development of for kids, but also for
Right.
adults, and our hormones are impacted when we're not getting that quality sleep. So this is all in the domain of kind of quality. And then when we look at things like REM, you can almost think of REM as your inner therapist.
Mhm.
And REM happens more routinely on the second half of the night. So if you are someone that tends to, oh, I got to get up to get to the Pilates class or whatever, then that can be impacting your ability to get sufficient REM. Also, if you have any of those sleep disorders, so if you're waking up
Mhm.
a bunch throughout the night and have no idea that part of that is because of sleep apnea, snoring, upper air resistance syndrome, bruxism, et cetera, then you could be experiencing that impacted quality of that sleep. So sleep staging is comes into play, and that's becoming a problem for how you're feeling and your experience of life the next day. It
Right.
can then spill into things like your reproductive health, your waistline, so even your glucose stability for the next day, safety elements for your ability to stay fully alert, maybe behind the wheel, or if
Mhm.
you have more manual labor, related positions or what have you. Um, so all of these things, what we see is that when you pan out and your sleep isn't working, then we struggle to find a single area of life that's not impacted when it's not
Mhm.
working. So that can go from across the gamut, all the way to things that we might not even expect, like interpersonal relationships. We have studies to
Sure.
point to when people are sleep deprived, that their ability to, kind of communicate is impacted. Their ability to read faces, like,
Mhm.
what's the intention of the person I'm talking to? All of these things can kind of go awry when our sleep is not on point. So I would actually encourage people to try to even give me like one example of an area that's not impacted, because
Sure.
we can find correlations with just about every angle of life.
Sure. I'd say probably if I had to say the first thing, right, I would ask people if it were me is, well, how do you wake up in the morning?
Yeah.
Right? How do you feel when you wake
How do
up in
you
the morning?
feel? The subjective experience. Yeah.
Right. And I would say there are a lot of people in my life actually that say, I hate waking up. And I'm like, how
Yeah.
do you hate waking up? You should
Right.
love waking up. You
I
should be
know.
excited about life. But I've been there, right? And it took
Yes.
a lot of effort on my end to kind of figure out, hey, what's going on with me? And at the end of the day, I think I scaled it back to basics. Like, how
Oh,
do I live my life? And
totally.
so I think, the work that you're doing is remarkable. I am so happy you're doing this. I think it's very valuable and everyone needs to hear it. And
Mm,
just basics. I like
yeah.
to break things down into their simplest form.
Sure.
It's just basically how I do things.
Yes.
But I think it's important work that you're doing, and I'm glad that you're putting it out there. I researched you and studied you a little bit before this podcast, and I'm very excited about the work you're doing, and I hope you get it out there in front of as many people as possible. I'm glad we could do it in a small, big scale, however it turns out. But
Yeah.
you know, I'm proud of you, girl. I think you're doing some great stuff here.
Oh, well,
So
thank you. And the feeling is mutual. So thank
thank
you for putting
you.
in the time, energy, and effort. I
For
know
sure.
as someone that also runs a podcast, and it's not just something you just do, like it takes
Right.
something. So I really
Yeah.
acknowledge you for putting in the
Hmm.
work
Thank you.
and bringing the
Mhm.
passion, and putting in, the time beforehand. Not everyone does do much research, for
Mhm.
the guests that are coming on.
Mhm.
So, you're already setting yourself outside of the pack because that is incredible. So great work.
Thank you.
And thanks so much for the kind words. That means a ton. I have close family members that I saw go down the path of heavy duty pharmaceuticals with their
Right.
sleep and really just find themselves in a tricky situation. So that was part of the passion for me to get my
Right.
own sleep figured out, but also now today to work with so many people and see exactly that, the struggle that they're coming to, and often like, just desperation or fear or resignation.
Mhm.
But the message is the same, that no matter what's been going on with your sleep, we can absolutely transform this area of life. And so you're not stuck with whatever you've been experiencing.
Mhm. So where can we find you?
Sleepisaskill.com can act as a kind of landing page for a number of things. They can take a sleep assessment. They can get information back right away to help support their journey with their sleep. They can sign up for our newsletter, our podcast, work with us one-on-one or in small groups. So no matter where you're at, if you're just kind of sleep curious or really looking for some support, we can absolutely help you out in that journey.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us on this week's episode, and we'll be in touch. I'm so excited for
Awesome.
you. Keep at it. Keep
Oh,
at
thank
it.
you. You too. Appreciate
Alrighty.
it.
Till the next time.
Great. Thank you.